Donut Bag is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Your data is your business. Protect it with ExpressVPN. For 3 extra months free with a 1-year package, go to the link listed in my Twitter profile. All right. We haven't talked in a few weeks, but so I don't know what your thoughts were before the series, but I'm guessing it was the same as mine and a lot of people, that you were hopeful and optimistic the Penguins might do something, and then but I did not expect this. That's for
You know what?
sure.
I'll just lay it on the line. I was not hopeful or optimistic for them. I did not think. I really thought they were kind of going into the playoffs like limping in for a slaughter. I thought they talked about how they're, we have a lot of veterans, we have this leadership, we that's going to come into play, and I'm listening to them talk about that, and I'm thinking, good luck. Like I've been watching these last few weeks. I just don't see that happening. I don't think you're going to flip that switch. You're just so far away at this time from flipping that switch that I don't know how that's going to happen. And so I really expected nothing. And I thought you're going in to play a very good New York Rangers team with a lot of skill, very physical, a tremendous goaltender. They've beaten you very soundly the last 3 times you played. This isn't going very far. I thought 5 games, maybe 6 games tops. This is another first round exit, 100%. I had no hope for them whatsoever. So I will, I'll come right out and say it, because if the next couple of games prove me wrong, I mean, so far they've absolutely proven me wrong, and it's been really exciting to watch.
You just touched on it. They say, well, you can't just flip the switch. They flipped the switch. They found the switch and they flipped it.
Silly me for doubting them. I'm embarrassed that I doubted them, honestly, because they really, I think what has really made the difference these last few games is that veteran leadership and experience of those Stanley Cup runs that this team has had. A large number of its members, you have the Penguins core who have been through those Stanley Cups. And then you have other players who have been at it, like Jeff Carter, who have also been through those types of experiences, even if not with this team. You have players that have this type of experience. And I think it's just such a well-built team for this type of situation. It's really come into play for me for the last few games. And last night, I'm watching them thinking, okay, they have a 4-1 lead. Where have I seen this before? And are they going to have learned anything? And that, to me, is where you really see a team come to, the experience and so on sort of come into play. The game before, in the second period, they came out and they completely blew that lead. It's 4-1. By the end of the period, it's 4-4. They have to find a way to come back and win that game, and eventually they did. And Mike Sullivan said that made me incredibly proud, because a lot of teams wouldn't have done that. That would have been it. They would have been done. And he's right. And this team was not done. And they did find a way to get that game. And last night, they learned a lesson from it. And, I think the Rangers just may not have that yet. They're a team that's newer to this. And some teams just have to go through it before they get that experience. And the Penguins did too. So maybe that's where the Rangers are right now.
When you talk about, you hear all the time, experience in the playoffs and how important it is. And I think that is huge right now. The Rangers are good and they're young and they're going to be good, but this is really their first exposure to the actual playoffs with an actual crowd. And it's a shock for them. And for the Penguins, this is, they've been through this many times before. So I think the experience issue is a huge advantage for the Penguins.
It is. The Rangers haven't been there at all in 5 years. So this is a new experience for even some of their more experienced, more veteran players. But they do have a lot of younger players on their team. Their goalie, this is his first playoff experience. And I think it's interesting that you're really seeing um, the the pressure of this and what the Penguins fans did to him in the last couple of games. I think the Penguins crowd, I think they played no small part in the outcome of those couple of games. He really crumbled when the chanting started, and a couple of goals got past him, and he just started to look unglued. He started to look really rattled. His game just fell apart, and all of the all of the precision with which he normally plays that position, you just saw all of it sort of fall by the wayside, and he looked like a very ordinary goaltender who was just kind of floundering. And I don't think the crowd had any small part to do with that. I think he really was rattled by it, and a more veteran goaltender kind of listens to that and shrugs it off and maybe even enjoys it, like, yeah, fine, hate me, this is great.
Right. Yeah.
But he played the hate me card with the waving goodbye to them in the last regular season game. But when push comes to shove and it's playoff pressure, he looks like he's having a hard time with it.
I was at the game last night, and I mean, I've been to many games. That might have been the loudest I've ever heard of the crowd, and the entire crowd chanting Igor it was deafening. It was really loud.
From the minute they started it in the first game here, it was surreal to me. I'm like, wow, it's his first playoff game here. He's already made himself a villain. This is surreal.
Yeah. It's his
Yeah.
parents' fault for having such an easily singable name.
Well, yeah, right. When they put Georgiev in,
Yeah,
didn't
we can't
know
say
what to do with
Georgiev.
that one, right?
Georgiev. It doesn't work.
Well, the Rangers fans call him Georgie sometimes, so that's
Okay.
an easily singable name. I think Penguins fans could
Georgie.
go with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I also don't think you're going to see him much back even if they come back to Pittsburgh, because he's they're going back to Shesterkin, as they should. I mean, he's their guy. But yeah, I thought that was pretty wild. And even even when they did do the goalie replacement, they went with "We want Igor" as the chant and just kept on him. So
He wasn't even there, and we were chanting, "We want Igor." That was so
well,
funny.
he's sitting on the bench, so it's like, hey, let's continue to torment him. He's in earshot. Let's remind him that he was terrible. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
what a thing! If you would have asked me how I thought the series was going to go, that would not have been on my bingo card for certain. So
You really thought it's like, well, okay, before the series, you would have said, well, if they're gonna win games, it's gonna be 1-0, 2-1. They'll be lucky to get any past Igor. And here
right.
we're kicking touchdowns. We're throwing touchdowns every single game.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Well, these last few postseasons where they've gotten knocked out in the first round, they haven't been able to find any offense. So I think the fact that they've been able to generate this much offense against a team that you would think would be better able to shut them down, and a goalie that would be better able to shut them down, just really has me shaking my head. But the Rangers players too, like, I feel bad, honestly. I feel bad for the position that Shesterkin has found himself in, because he has been hung out to dry by his
Yes.
team. They've
Yes.
looked terrible. They have absolutely collapsed in front of him, and not in the good way of actually collapsing in front of your goaltender, but like collapsed defensively. They just look so bad and lost, and the defensive coverage has been terrible, and they look lost. They don't know what to do with the Penguins. They absolutely don't know what to do with the Crosby line. They can't handle that whatsoever. And now the Penguins are getting other lines to step up too. They have as far as their expected goals, the percentages, they have 3 of their 4 lines in the top 8 in the playoffs altogether. So when you have that kind of stuff happening for the just your players making offense happen like that, good luck.
I thought it was interesting after the game. The Rangers coach said, "Well, yeah, we're going with Igor. He's our goalie," and he basically blamed the team. And I look back at the game, and he was absolutely right. And you're right; they hung
Mhm.
him out to dry. Almost every single goal was one of the Penguins planting themselves in front of the goalie so he couldn't
Yep.
see, and then somebody gets off a shot and there's a deflection and it goes through Shesterkin. That's not his fault. I mean, yes, a goalie is allowed to stop a deflection, but still, when you make it really impossible for him to do his job, that's on the team.
Well, the Penguins have been saying for weeks, the phrase they keep using is if he can see it, he's going to stop it. And they're absolutely right about that. So their approach was, get shots in there, crash the net, make sure he doesn't see it, generate shots from in tight. And they weren't doing that through the season. That was really a problem in those last 3 games. I felt they looked intimidated by him. I felt they were putting shots on from a distance that weren't really high percentage shots. And they just looked like a team that were scared of this goaltender. And now they're in the playoffs and the playoff experience is coming into play. And they realize that when it's the postseason, you have to play a little differently. And if you look at the I put in a story that I did last night, a heat map from Natural Stat Trick, and you can see where the shots were generated from. And the Ranger shots, you can see they're way far back, and they're kind of generating the types of scoring chances and shots that the Penguins were generating through those last few games of the regular season. They just are low percentage chances. They're not, they're things that if Louis Domingue sees he's going to be able to stop or somebody's going to block, they're just not good percentage chances. The Penguins chances, you see all of this color around the net, and that's where they're generating the chances. That's what they had to do, and the Rangers are allowing them to do it. So unfortunate for them because the Penguins game plan is playing out to exactly as the way they hoped it would.
And it also, the Crosby line, and in particular Sidney Crosby, is on some insane level right now. Crosby might be playing the best of his career, and that entire line is amazing. Memo to the Rangers: that Gensel guy's pretty good. You might want to cover him.
It's so cool to see. Yeah, you're absolutely right about Jake Gensel, and he's just he's such a playoff producer and has been since he entered the league. So nothing about that surprises me. But obviously the Rangers aren't doing a very good job of shutting down either of those two. And Crosby, I find it hilarious that every year, and this year in particular, he sort of starts to fall out of the conversation as the best player in the league. And you start to hear, okay, Connor McDavid, or, maybe it's Nathan McKinnon, or whoever is being talked about as potentially the best player in the league now. And he just kind of falls out of the discussion. And then he comes into the playoffs and he's like, hey, I'm here. Remember me? And he's just dominating the discussion now, and he's dominating on the ice, and he is really leading the Penguins in this effort. So it's been really fun to watch him, and just the plays he's making. You're reminded repeatedly of what an elite player he is, and still, even this far into his career, he not only hasn't lost anything, but I think he just keeps adding to his skill set. As we've talked about before, he's a player that never rests on his skill set and feels very adamant that if anything feels like it's lacking in any given year, he goes off that summer and focuses on working on that. So he's just such a hardworking hockey player and always wants to continue getting better. And I agree with you. I don't think I've seen him functioning at a higher level than this.
Apparently, ESPN had him as the 19th best player going into the
Yeah,
playoffs.
I
Like, are
saw
you
that.
kidding me?
It's
My
such
goodness.
disrespect, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It really is. And I understand there's a lot of great players in this league now, and there's a lot of players that have had really spectacular regular seasons, and maybe the Penguins aren't a favorite to win the Stanley Cup. And I just admitted I didn't even think they'd win around, but I think you know what I can tell you this. This tells you a little bit about how I feel about Sidney Crosby. I didn't think the Penguins would win around But I'm in a playoff pool where I pick 25 players that you sort of ride the whole way through the playoffs, and however many points they score is, how many points you get from them. So of course you want to pick players who you think are going to go far. So
Yeah, yeah.
I think I have 5 players from Colorado on my team, because I'm pretty sure they're that's really my pick to win the Stanley Cup. So you kind of weight how many players you pick from a team based on how far you think they're going to go. But I picked one Penguin, and that's the Penguin I picked because I figured, you know what, if they go out in a round, he could still do a lot of damage in that round. And if they happen to not go out in that round, at least I've got him. And I just don't. He functions at that level, and in the playoffs, he's such a competitive hockey player. He's going to produce for you. He just is.
It also makes you wonder if he's also playing out of his mind, because most likely this is the last time Malkin and Letang will be together. So
Oh
it
yeah,
makes me
I've
wonder
thought about
if
that a lot.
yeah, if there's this last dance mentality.
Yeah, I think he's thinking about that. I absolutely think he's thinking about that. And can you imagine like the disappointment of, okay, so we went into the playoffs with this last chance, and everything changes after this season, and we went out in 4 or 5 games to the Rangers. I think he would be incredibly disappointed in that. So he's out there doing his best to make it happen and extend it as much as he can. And honestly, I was thinking about it last night watching the way they're playing, and even though they might not be many people's pick as a Stanley Cup contender, you kind of look at the matchups and start to think about how it could potentially fall for them. And I still think a team like Colorado that would be a heck of a challenge if they got that far. But after you get past a first round like this, and a team like this, and the way that they're playing these games, the way that they are starting to really find their game and find their offense, find the two-way game that they were able to play last night. They were practically playing keep away with the puck from the Rangers. The forecheck was so strong. And if they're starting to find that type of game and just rolling into a future round, if they do manage to get out of this one, I feel like that's the way that you can start to roll in the playoffs. And maybe the next team that you see, if it's Carolina or whomever, maybe you become a problem. So who knows what could happen.
It makes you wonder, because I mean, we have been talking, for the past year about, how stacked the Eastern Conference is and how tough it would be to get far in the playoffs because the teams are so good. But the playoffs are a whole different thing and a whole different animal. So yeah, and the other thing to consider is the Penguins are winning without not their starting goalie, not their backup, their third string goalie, who is
Yep.
basically a folk hero. But I'm sorry, as he would put it, not the best.
He is. I mean, he's still a third string goalie. He's a journeyman goalie. He's 30 years old. He's played about 6 teams in the league. He's an AHL goalie, and I have to give him a ton of credit. He came in, particularly that first game. He comes in a second overtime. Are you kidding me? Yeah, and the pressure that you come in that situation, knowing the next goal wins, and you come in cold. I just can't even imagine the mentality of that. And somehow he hangs on. I think he made 17 saves in that game between the second and third overtimes, and gives the Penguins the opportunity to win that game, which they do. And then he's the guy. We find out that Casey DeSmith has had season-ending core muscle surgery again. So Tristan Jarry, he's back on the ice, but he is not coming riding in to save the Penguins, next game, or maybe even the game after. Maybe if they get to the next round, maybe he's ready at that point. But that's just not a position where you can rush a player back. So I think it's Louis Domingue's net for a minute, and I almost wonder if the Penguins are playing the way they are a little bit because they're aware of what this goaltending situation is.
Yeah.
I wonder if this benefits them. You know, like, it's really odd to talk about it potentially benefiting them, but remember early in the season when they really were buying into Mike Sullivan's system, and it was just so incredibly impressive how this team that never cared about playing defensively was suddenly playing so responsibly and making smart decisions with the puck. I feel like that's what we're seeing right now. And what was the common denominator? Back in the start of the season, they're missing Crosby, they're missing Malkin. They just keep losing players to injury or to COVID, and it's next man up. And they're like, okay, we're fine. We've got our system. We're playing our system. I feel like maybe that's a little what you're seeing right now.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, they were playing his system perfectly and they were just rattling off like huge winning streaks. So
Mm-hmm.
funny. Yeah, I think a lot of that is mental. I think a lot of that is, hey, we got maybe not the best goalie back here. Let's protect them. Now they didn't do that in what was it, game 2 when they got blown out, but this past game, Domingue was not challenged that much, and it is also the crowd was funny because anything that Domingue would do, the crowd would just start a Lou.
Yeah, their support has been fantastic for him.
It's so cute. It's so cute. It's
It
such a
is.
story.
It's wonderful. I mean, he's super likable. I don't know how you couldn't like him, and the story is great. So I just think the same way as the crowd getting on Shesterkin's case, I think has made a real negative difference for him. I think the extreme positive support for Louis Domingue has made a real positive difference for him, and he, um, you know, in game 3, at the end of the game, they were interviewing him and trying to interview him on the ice after the game, and the fans were just drowning out Sam Kotash with the Lou, and Domingue grabs the microphone from him and says, you know, thank you, fans. He was just so obviously moved by it, and it was just a really nice moment. So I think the fans know what they're feeling, but here they know he's a third string goalie, and I think just like you said, if you kind of rally behind everything positive he does, but he hasn't. To his credit, he has been a capable enough NHL goaltender through this
Yeah,
year. It's like
yeah,
he hasn't been a superstar, and he hasn't had to be. But like I think there was one moment in Game 3 where he made a huge. It was when it was 4-4 and the Penguins have blown that lead, and you know it's a tie game at this point. I think it was in the third period, and he made a really spectacular sort of a post to post save on Artemi Panarin, who's no slouch of a hockey player, and it was one of those deals where you make the save at the one end and then play almost immediately goes the other end,
yeah.
and the Penguins managed to get the goal, and that's the goal that puts them ahead and ends up being the game winner. And if he doesn't make that huge save at that moment, maybe that doesn't go the other way and they don't get that chance to win. So those are the types of saves when they talk about timely saves that stick in my mind, and that's what you need from your goalie occasionally through the playoffs, and he has managed to give them that.
Another surprise is Kasperi Kapanen. Who'd have
Yeah.
thunk? Like the guy that was slumping all year suddenly comes alive in the playoffs, and he even acknowledges like, "Hey, better late than never, I guess."
Oh man, that guy. It's so maddening because you see him last night. He makes this pass to Evgeny Malkin, that's just this no look behind the back pass, and you look at him like it's like a Harlem Globetrotter type pass, and you shake your head like, are you kidding me? Like, where is this? Like, why don't you show this more? Because clearly you've got it. It's so painful that he has that skill, and a lot of times I just get the feeling that he doesn't care to do the things he knows he has to do, and it's very frustrating. So I don't know, but right now, the hope has always been that he would find that chemistry with Evgeny Malkin, and that has been apparent at times through this series. And if that continues to work out, if that would manage to be something that would catch on for the long run, uh, it would feel amazing that the Penguins didn't move him at the deadline, because Kasperi Kapanen clicking with Evgeny Malkin, well, assuming Evgeny Malkin stays, because that's not a done deal either, is it? But yeah, if those two could click, that's something that you've been hoping to see for quite some time. So yeah, just frustrating. He just kind of feels to me sometimes like that kid in school who's, everybody knows he's one of the smartest kids in the class, but he's just content to get C's. He's just,
that's that is the perfect description of him.
it's
Yeah.
just how I always think of him. He's just that kid that you look at. I have a brother like that. He's a doctor now, by the way. But he went through school, and he was that kid that just got C's, and you looked at him and you were like, this is ridiculous, because you were so much better than that.
And the teachers
Okay.
pulling their hair out. It's like, I know you could do better.
My mother would be at home sitting at the table with him, trying to get him to do his homework, and he just didn't care. And I remember all the things she missed because she's sitting there like struggling with him to do his work. And I'm like, this isn't right. This just isn't right. And she would say, you don't understand, because it comes easy to you. And I would just shake my head and say, that's not what's happening here. It doesn't come easy to me. It's like, I care. And, if he would care, it would be a completely different story. Then one day, of course, life happens and it clicks for him. And he's like, oh, maybe I should care. And as I said, now he's a doctor. So there you go.
There you go.
But yeah, so yeah, that's what Kasperi Kapanen reminds me of. Just how maybe one day it'll click and he'll become his own version of a doctor. But I just look at him and I'm like, man, this guy is he's just happy being what he is, But he's got it. He's absolutely got it. And you see those glimpses, and boy, he's an impressive player to watch when he's got it going.
That line with Malkin, Kapanen, and Heinen are doing so well. But
yeah,
what do you do when Raquel comes back? It looks like he's coming back pretty soon. I mean, do you put him on the third line with Carter and Zucker? Or I don't know. Maybe Raquel doesn't have a place now.
Raquel has a place. They didn't give up those assets for him to not have him have a place. Trust me. So yeah, but I mean, that third line that you just mentioned is the line that could actually use a little bit of a boost right now. That's the only line that's not currently generating as much offensively. So maybe that is the line that could use some, a little boost offensively, and maybe that is where Raquel starts out if they don't want to mess with what's working on that second line. Who knows? But I do think they brought him in specifically to play alongside Malkin, so I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up back there. Another nice surprise right now. Also, it would be very easy to say, oh, knock Danton Heinen off of that line, but Danton Heinen has, I think it's 6 goals in his last 12 games. And so he's been a streaky scorer for a lot of his career, but this season we've certainly seen that. And right now he's on a pretty good streak. So I don't know if this is necessarily the time you want to mess with that either. So he was a player to me that could have, when they got healthy, actually fallen out of the lineup entirely, but not so much right now.
He is super streaky. He will go on these great goal tears, and then there are times where he deserves to be benched because he looks like he's never seen an ice rink before. So ride the wave. If he's doing well, keep him in there. Yeah.
I wouldn't change much given what we've seen the last couple of games. You've got 7 goals over each of the last 2 games. I don't know why you would mess with that.
I wonder if Evan Rodriguez is also getting on one of those hot streaks again, like he did earlier in the season.
Yeah, definitely starting to see signs of that. And he is a player who has talked about his confidence being such an important factor. I don't think I have ever seen a hockey player who acknowledges that his confidence is such a big deal for him. And if it's not working for him at the time, if things aren't going in, he can be getting chances, but if they're not bearing, the confidence is just dwindling for him. And if his confidence is coming back, and right now he is starting to get those rewards, and I think that is a player that really feeds off of it. And now that he's starting to get that success again, I think you could see him head right back on one of those streaks, because he is very much a player who thrives on when he is feeling it. So it's really odd, because I've never seen a player talk so much about how much that does affect him, and very clearly shows you how much hockey can be a mental game.
I've never seen anything like Rodriguez earlier in the regular season. He was maybe the best player in the league. He was just on fire like I've never seen anyone. So, and then he just came back down to earth. So yeah, it's it got to be mental.
Yeah.
I wonder if Boyle should maybe be replaced by O'Connor.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing that personally. And I really like Brian Boyle and love what he did this year for the Penguins. I think he's filled in admirably during times he's needed to. And there's been times he's really brought a really a really good element to that team in terms of what they've needed on that fourth line. But he has even chipped in the occasional goal. He's brought a lot of positives to the team. But I think overall, the style they're trying to play, and right now they're pretty successful at it in terms of the intensity of the forecheck, the skating. They're trying to play this speed game to compete with the Rangers' speed. And as much as I kind of laughed at that through the season, like, okay, you guys still think you're the team from 2016-17, and you're a few years older than that now, and maybe that's not going to work for you anymore. Maybe you're going to need to adjust that approach a bit. I do think right now they are very much effective at that skating game, and the energy and the forecheck is really working for them. So I just think when they're trying to play that type of game, a player like Brian Boyle isn't necessarily able to contribute at the level that you might hope he would. So Drew O'Connor, another strong player as far as a physical player. He's absolutely worked on that element of his game, but also could probably bring a little bit more in terms of the speed and skating and a little more of an offensive upside. I wouldn't mind seeing that.
And on the defense, because Dumoulin is hurt, you have Matheson up with Letang, and it's not totally working all the time. But then do they really have a choice? Because you don't want to break up Marino and Pettersson, and Friedman and Ruedel just aren't qualified to be up there with Letang. So you're kind of stuck with that, and you hope that it gets better.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what Mike Sullivan is doing at this point, is hoping it gets better, because he went in the third period of the previous game when Matheson and Letang were an absolute train wreck, and were responsible for pretty directly for a couple of those goals that led to the Penguins blowing that 4-1 lead. Just really head scratching. And Mike Matheson is just not a great complement to Chris Letang. He does not allow him to play Chris Letang's game the way that Brian Dumoulin facilitates that ability for Chris Letang to sort of take a little more risk in his play. Even the version of Brian Dumoulin we saw this year, who I thought was not a great version of Brian Dumoulin, he knows Chris Letang. He reads Chris Letang well. He's infinitely better at that. So it's been rough to watch that pairing when it hasn't worked, but he was right back to it at the start of game 4, and I kind of shook my head about that. But I think you're exactly right. I think he just doesn't like messing with that second pair of Pettersson and Marino, and Pettersson's the one that got bumped up with Letang during that third period of the previous game, just because I think he needed to do something and stop the bleeding. But I went right back to it, and this is what you've got at this point. This is what you have to do when you have injury situations. So I guess they go with it for for as long as they have to, and hopefully those two continue to learn to work better and improve. And I thought Letang did a better job overall this year of making smarter plays and being a little more defensively responsible. So maybe that's just something he's going to need to focus on in his own game too, knowing that he doesn't necessarily have a defensive partner who can make up for that for him.
Yeah, I mean, if you think you have to be the offensive one, but you have someone that's also very good offensively, maybe it's like, okay, maybe I'll be the defensive guy, because Letang is so good. He could easily be like a defensive star if he wanted to. It's just
Absolutely. But also I think just from the perspective of like, hey, if that play's not there, if there's a 50% possibility that that play you're about to make could lead to a turnover, maybe just don't make that play.
yeah.
Like maybe just be a little more thoughtful about things like that, because normally Chris Letang's going to make that play and he's going to take that 50% chance. But
Right.
maybe now is not the time. Maybe now just be a little more thoughtful and think about what you're dealing with from the injury and partner situation.
Exactly. So do you think they close it out in game 5, or is this going 6 or 7?
I feel like the Penguins have. I'm interested to see what they do, honestly, because I feel like we've been talking about the maturity and the veteran leadership of this team, and how we've really seen them learn some lessons here the last couple games. What I would love to see from them tomorrow night is it would be really neat to see them go out and say, yeah, we theoretically have 3 chances to close this out, but we really don't want to get into that. Like you blow game 5 and you come back to Pittsburgh and you're just starting to take chances with the series at that point. Let's come out here and play the same way we played in Pittsburgh, and let's just get this over with. Like I want to see that level of maturity. I want to see that level of let's not take our foot off the gas and let's play the same style of game we played in Pittsburgh. So I think if they go out and give it their best shot and play very similarly to what they played here, they could be wrapping it up tomorrow. But the Rangers are obviously going to come with their best effort, and I wouldn't be at all surprised to see Shesterkin look more like the Vezina, probable Vezina winner that he is tomorrow, because he's way too good for what he's looked like.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you figure he's going to bounce back. You figure the whole team is going to bounce back. But yeah, it would be nice if the Penguins just said, hey, if we win Wednesday, we get a nice little break here, guys. we can rest up and let our hurt players come back. So, I don't think it's going to happen. I think it'll end up going to 6, but it would be nice. Yeah, it would be nice if the Penguins made that statement and said, okay, you guys, you Rangers, you're just not, it's not your year. You're the future. You're not now.
Exactly. Yeah. This is your year to learn. And, we're the ones who have been there, done that. And we're going to go on. It would be nice to see them go out and make that statement. I think, really the point you made about getting a chance to rest from injury, not only the players who are actually on the shelf with injuries right now, but even players who are trying to play right now. Like last night, there was a point that it looked like Jason Zucker was shook up again.
Yeah.
And he's had a few moments like that through the season since he's come back. And there was a point in time that he was near the bench, but not on the bench. He was like near the runway. He was kind of sitting on something else and looked like he was sort of rocking back and forth. And it's like, oh my goodness, he's trying to get himself through, like something's wrong and he's going to keep trying to play. So just stuff like that. And, there are players out there this time of year who are playing through various stuff and just aren't going to sit out. So, yeah, like Chris Kreider came back yesterday with a puck-sized, puck-shaped bruise on his neck from somebody posted about that, because I did not think he was coming back after taking this incredible shot from it was Mika Zibanejad shot it, but I think it deflected off somebody from the Penguins and ended up hitting Chris Kreider in the throat at full speed. And oh, did he look in terrible pain going down the runway. And I thought, wow, this is something to watch, because he's probably their best player and probably will be their captain at some point soon. And it just this is going to be a really big loss. And he comes out for the next period and I'm stunned. And I saw somebody post, yeah, here's what he's out there looking like. So yep, that's just how you play in the playoffs. So
he
the most
probably
time
has a
they can get
broken neck or crushed
I
larynx or something like that. He's just playing through it. Yeah.
I yeah, just play through the pain of whatever oh my goodness, I don't even want to know. It's like
Yeah.
it's probably it's like in that collarbone area, probably, like, oh my gosh, I
Ugh.
don't even want to know. I don't even want to know.
Uh,
So
I,
yeah, it's
I,
so
I,
bad.
I heard Phil Borka recently. He's like, when he was playing and being in the playoffs, he's like, I don't know how I'm going to get out of bed, let alone play tonight, but somehow they find a way to play. Yeah. They have to be so sore or just so injured or who knows what's going on. So
Terrible. Yeah,
yeah.
but hopefully they do find a way to close this out and get themselves some rest and head into a next series on a big high of having really surprised a lot of people, but obviously not themselves, because they've been talking like this the whole time. And I am certainly impressed, gotta say. So far
Yes.
they have really been something.
It's fun. It's just fun. This is
It
way
is.
more fun than the past few years when it's just extremely frustrating watching them play, the Islanders or the Montreal or whoever. This is, no matter what happens, this is just a lot of fun.
Couldn't agree with you more. It's been really a lot of fun to watch, and just fun to watch the Penguins elite players playing like the Penguins elite players again. Like
Yes.
that for me has
Yes.
been the most fun of it.
Yes. All right. And this conversation has been fun. So
Yeah,
thanks.
always. Thank you for
Always.
having me.
Thank you. All right. I'll see you.
Take care.
Bye.